Members, it's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I call the meeting to order. As it is a special meeting today, before the meeting, we received from a member, Mr. Lee, in relation to an accident in the MTR yesterday. I am not going to deal with it because it is a special meeting today. And we will follow up on this with the government in the panel. That is to say, in the subcommittee on railways, we received a paper in the English version, which has already been tabled for your reference in relation to the first item. The first item on the agenda, 6891TH-1, Tsing Yi-Lantau link, investigation and detailed design. Please welcome the administration. We have provided two papers, the first one by the government, the second one by the Legislative Secretariat. As the administration is entering the chamber, in accordance with the rules of procedure, in accordance with Section 83A, should members have a pecuniary interest, whether direct or indirect, in the matter being discussed today, they should discuss the nature of the relevant interest before they speak. We welcome the administration, Mrs. Sharon Yip Lee, Deputy Secretary from the Transport and Logistics Bureau, as well as from the Highways Department, Mr. Lok and his colleagues. They will answer questions raised to them. Shall we first start with an introduction? Please press the button. Good afternoon, Chair, members. In order to cope with the traffic arising from the progressive development of Northwest New Territories, the government is taking forward different projects, including Route 11, Tsing to Lantau, Yuen Long Highway, as well as Yuen Long Highway, Lam Tay to Yuen, while Tong Yen San Chun. It will connect Northwest New Territories and the city. It will also improve the existing traffic conditions in Tai Lam Tunnel, Tenkau Bridge. It will also improve the traffic condition on Lantau Link, as well as boosting the connectivity as well as the capability of the capacity in relation to relevant roads. It will unleash the development potential in Northwest New Territories and Lantau Island. The government aims at commissioning the relevant roads by 2030. The government respectively launched Route 11 investigation study in September 2021 and in October 2022. They are investigation studies and detailed designs. In October 2022, the Highways Department has finished the investigation study of Tsing to Lantau link, TYLL. We have already established an appropriate alignment. We have already finished a study in relation to alignment. And we will seek support from the Subcommittee on Public Works. And we will also apply from the Finance Committee for a 730 million funds in relation to the investigation study and detailed design in relation to TYLL. I will invite the Highways Department to walk us through the project of TYLL. Thank you, Mr. Lok. Chair, members, good afternoon. Today I will introduce to you TYLL, Tsing Yi-Lantau link, in order to unleash the development potential of Northwest New Territories and Lantau. We will provide the most direct and alignment connecting Lantau and the city. It can improve the traffic conditions. And it can also provide an alternative connecting the city and Northwest New Territories in order to direct traffic in the city. We can also improve the road network, that is to say the range of routes as well as the capability to handle contingencies. The preliminary alignment design is that at both ends they are major routes. They are well above principal datum. We suggest, by way of a bridge, construct a 5.2-kilometer bridge connecting 2 points. It will span Kap Shui Mun Fairway and the other fairway. This proposal, using a shorter distance to span Ma Wan Fairway, it will not take up Ma Wan Fairway or Ma Wan Anchorage. It will not affect the port operation either. It will also have less of an impact on the oil storage facilities and the relevant marine facilities. This can also spare the need to construct yet another bridge in the locality. In terms of project cost effectiveness, operation, the proposed alignment is the most cost-effective. In North Legislative, we will construct North Legislative interchange to connect TYLL to North Legislative Highway. It will also connect to KYC Artificial Islands. Connecting to Route 11, vehicles can directly go to northwest of the new territories. There will also be a slip road connecting northwest new territories. Vehicles in the future can go to the Hong Kong International Airport through T1 and Tung Chung new towns. They can also use the relevant roads of KYC Artificial Islands to go to Hong Kong Island or KYC Artificial Islands. To the west of Tsing, a connection point will also be constructed, connecting the roads within the Tsing district, including north and west of Tsing. Taking the main route and the Stonecutters Bridge, it can go to the city. It can also take the slip road, that is to say North Tsing Bridge, to go to Tsuen Wan. It can also take another slip road to go to the South District in Tsing. We estimate the funding, well, that is to say the study expenses to be $730 million. The investigation is in relation to Route 11, KYC Artificial Islands, P1. We will also consider alignment as well as the design proposals. We will also conduct an assessment on the environment, traffic, heritage, land, and other aspects as well. Apart from that, we will also assess the structure of the viaduct and the Cross Harbour Bridge, assessing the wind resistance capability through a wind tunnel test. We will also aim to obtain sufficient data in this respect. We will also deal with the tendering processes as well as the shortlisting processes. We will also conduct on-site investigation, including marine investigation as well as slope investigation. We will then seek support from the Subcommittee on Public Works. We will also apply for funding from the Finance Committee in order to complete the investigation and the detailed design in relation to TYLL. We expect to finish this in 48 months. Well, in relation to the schedule, we will finish this in 48 months, covering different periods, including the gazettal and statutory procedures in relation to an ordinance, CAP 370. On the other hand, in September 2021, the Highways Department has already completed a stage of work, and in October 2022, we have already finished Yuen Long Highways, Lam Tay to TYST widening works. We aim to commission the aforesaid whole set of the road by 2033 in a progressive manner. This is our introduction, and we welcome members' views. 10 members have already pressed the button to speak, and we have 35 minutes on this topic. I will allow 3.5 minutes for each of the members, so please have a better time management. The first one, Mr. Michael Tin. After Mr. Michael Tin, I will draw a line because of time constraints. Mr. Michael Tin, please, 3.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Well, we all understand very well how traffic congestion is in Tuen Mun Road today. There is a lot of vacant capacity because $50 a charge. After 2025, I believe that they will not be charged anymore. 2 are free, and for Tai Lam Tunnel, it will also become congested. So for Route 11, I believe that it is of utmost importance. I've already said that the citizens living there have 2 tunnels. They have the privilege, they have the advantage connecting to 3 highways. But then, when connected to Lantau Island, it would be of great trouble if they take the wrong route. That is to say, I request that it will be connected to a large octopus. That is to say, a very complicated graded interchange so that they can go to the city directly without affecting the vehicles leaving Lantau Link. On their trip back, they also have to fulfill the same requirement. So the octopus design is very important. I'd like you to make sure that whether these 2 projects will not clash with each other, they will not affect each other in terms of traffic volume. Secondly, Tsing Bridge now faces the wind. They take a lot of the wind. Sometimes the upper deck will be closed. With this bridge not in operation, you will close this bridge. It will not be in operation, leaving the lower portion of the Tsing Bridge. Is that the case? Is that because of monetary resources? If so, what is the differential? What is the difference? Mainly these 2 questions. Thank you, Michael Tin, for your question. In relation to the octopus design in the North Lantau interchange, we use interchange instead of a roundabout. There are different slip roads leading to their respective destinations. That is to say, we can have regard to our destination to take different routes. So your request in North Lantau interchange, this can already be solved. In relation to the design, we have to discuss with different projects. We have to discuss, especially for the KYC project, we have to tie in with it. We first have to make sure how we can connect them. Then this will stand us in better stead. In terms of wind resistance, in considering the issue of wind resistance, we actually undertook study as well. The upper deck is for vehicles. The second, that is to say the lower is for railway as well. In case of emergency, we expect that, emergency vehicles can also take that route. And we do not have to add yet another route underneath. I'm asking you about the figures. I'm sorry, Mr. Michael Tin. Time's up. Next one. Zhou Fi Chen.
It is said that for Route 11, it won't be later than 2033 that we see the commissioning. So for the Yi-Lantau link, and is together with Route 11, it means that they have to be commissioned before 2036 before it will be effective in easing the traffic pressure on local traffic. Currently, for Tuen Mun Road and Tuen Mun Chat Lap Kok link, they are both free. So I have a demand, I have a request, that is for the relevant links, they should also be toll-free. Otherwise, a few years down the road, we are going to see the problem we see in the second paper. That is, we will be plagued by the problems about tunnel tolls. Now, if you have got tolls for different roads and tunnels, then there will be a headache for us. So I try to be visionary and try to come up with this idea for the government. And then in terms of planning for Northwest New Territories, there will be a large number of developments, Hong Shui Kiu, Chun, NDAs, etc. There will be intake of population in 2024. Population will grow in Northwest NT. The current road networks cannot cope with the traffic demand. For TYLL, I think it will take almost 11 years for the planning, design, and construction. It shows that when it comes to the programming, the government takes a long time. Of course, we have to go through the statutory process, and therefore public works always lag behind. So it is high time for the government to review the pacing of the public works, and we have to make sure that we find ways to compress the time taken and try to enhance efficiency and fasten the speed. I hope the government will explain to us as to why it takes that long to plan, design, and construct TYLL. Two questions. First question for the Deputy Secretary. Are you going to waive the toll? Yes, let me comment on the tolls. Well, for tolled roads, on the one hand, the government can get revenue. On the other hand, of course, I think you know that in terms of traffic management, it is a tool for us to use. I'm thankful to Ms. Chen. When we look at the road or a road, whether it should be tolled or not, there are many factors at play that we need to consider. For example, if we have different options, different alignments reaching similar destinations, whether they are tolled or not, and whether the package of roads will have an impact on surrounding roads if a toll is charged. So currently, our thinking is that we have to check the impacts of whether it is tolled or not, and the design can accommodate either scenario. In other words, we are undecided as to whether Route 11 will be tolled or not. But we're grateful to Ms. Chen. That is, we will reconsider your point when it comes to a decision on whether charging a toll or not. Mr. Lok, the Director. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Chen. For this project, I think between now and the time of completion, there will be about 10 years. 4 years for the first part, 6 years for construction. Well, probably you will recall that for Chiang Mai Bridge, it took us 5 to 6 years' time to construct. So the scale is similar in terms of the work. And then for the 4 years for planning, where in fact we have tied in with the Hong Kong government's efforts to simplify our procedures, like amending the environmental impact assessment ordinance, compressing the time taken to go through a statutory process. For the investigation and design, etc., we are calling tenders at the same time so as to reduce the number of tender exercises. For the TYLL, now, of course, we echo the government's effort to raise efficiency, fasten the speed, and etc. So we will be adopting the same objectives. And we'll try to see whether we can make use of innovative technologies, whether we can make greater use of MICs so as to further reduce the amount of time taken. And we'll try to see if we can resort to new materials to shorten the construction time. So we're going to achieve that. Yes, try to keep your questions and answers simple. Well, times have changed, so probably we can see new technologies as well. Thank you. Next, Mr. Chan Hock Fong. Thank you, Chair. In the future, there will be the Northern Metropolis, Northwest NT, as well as Tung Chung. We'll see huge number of people moving into such areas. So the TYLL is fully justified. What concerns me is not so much the construction of this link. Of course, this will ease the pressure on Lantau Link. What worries me more is that at the end of the day, all of them will be linked up with Route 3 or West Kowloon Expressway. When you talk about trunk roads, do you know that during morning peaks, you have traffic turning back from Western Harbour Crossing to Olympian City? You are not going to build an extra road in West Kowloon, you're not going to solve the problem. You are just having traffic tailing back all the way to other areas. Now, you may think that with Yi-Lantau artificial islands, it will ease the pressure. But then it is a detour. It takes a detour. And at the end of the day, it will be connected with the Hong Kong island. There will again be congestion. There will be congestion at different sources. So please tell us how you're going to tackle the problem at root. Yes, we are building the Central Kowloon route. In Yau Ma Tei, outside Olympian City, we have the planned road so that from Kai Tak, we can take the traffic directly to Central Kowloon. And then we have the Crossway Link as well as the Chang Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel. This is Route 6. So between 2025-26, Route 6 will be commissioned and it will be earlier than the current proposed Route 11. In other words, in front of the Western Harbour crossing, there will be less traffic. Currently, the traffic is tailing back outside Olympian City to Cross Harbour Tunnel. So for Cross Harbour crossing vehicles, there will be more options. You can go via the Central Kowloon route to Kai Tak and then to Chang Kwan O. For the North Legislative Junction, for vehicles from Route 11 to Khao Yi Chau, there is a direct route. You don't need to go elsewhere. In other words, there will be diversion. So you can go down, so to speak, to Khao Yi Chau. So the traffic will be diversified in accordance with the different destinations. In other words, in the long term, we can divert the traffic. Chair, let me pick up a point. At the interchange, are you going to install AI facilities so that the motorists can be advised of the best route? I think that can be done. Yes, we can provide information to the motorists in the light of the current traffic conditions, and then they can choose the best route. Yes, noted. Mr. Chen, anything to add? No. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Guok. Thank you, Chair. I speak in support of the current proposal, namely the TYLL study. But then let me tackle a broader issue around the world. For international metropolis like Hong Kong, will always be adding more land to our area so as to cope with the land demand for more economic activities. In Hong Kong, we have been doing this since the beginning of our history. But then with the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR government, we have been dragging our feet. This is most regrettable. It shows that there were problems in the past. Of course, currently we have to be forward-looking. We will make good use of the opportunities posed by Legislative as well as the reclamation in the central waters near to Legislative. Therefore, for the Legislative link, currently the capacity is running out. It is a must that we enlarge the capacity. For this proposal, I think it is tantamount to widening the Legislative link. You know that we can't widen the Tsing Bridge, we have to build a new bridge. Therefore, to me, this study is a simple task. It doesn't take that long. Do you have another choice? You don't. I think you just try to have another bridge parallel to the current one. Do you really need that long? It was end of 1989. Lord Wilson announced the Rose Garden plan. There wasn't a single sheet of paper to show us. But then for the Chat Lap Kok Airport and Tsing Ma Bridge, etc., they were all commissioned in 1998. Not to mention that even the airport rail was also completed. So that was the speed that we had in those days. There's the British Hong Kong government, and of course we are now more advanced, and yet their speed was faster than ours. So we need to be more demanding when we come to such issues. We cannot afford to have more delays. So for this study, I hope that you will try to compress the time taken. We want to see the earlier beginning of the construction work. In fact, you don't have to wait for other studies or other works to be completed before you start this one. So it is necessary for us to fasten the speed, to enhance the speed. So please tell me whether you have room to further compress the time taken. For this particular link, it is not going to be a standalone project. We have the artificial islands, etc., as well as the related road networks. I think they would be sort of form part of the overall network. Thank you, Dr. Low. Thank you, Dr. Low, for your questions. Our team will try to reduce the time taken to design and to construct the road. But then we need to go through the statutory process. We need the time taken to go through the process properly. We will be carrying out the tasks in parallel rather than one after another. For the planning of this project, together with Road T1 team as well as the Yi-Lantau team, we have got certain initial exchange of ideas. But of course, we're all talking about preliminary designs. We all have to wait for confirmation of details in the detailed design stage. It takes coordination among departments like Highways Department, Transport Department, and we need to understand the requirements of the Fire Services Department. So we need to collect the information and we need to be coordinated. It will take a bit of time. And then, of course, we all know that for infrastructural projects, we need to be as fast as possible. And that's true for our works team as well. Well, just to add one more word, with good governance under the SARG, we need to enhance the quality, we need to enhance the speed as well as the efficiency. Mr. Chen Hanpeng, Mr. Chairman, we have the rail projects, we have airport rail express as well as Tung Chung line, but then we are not able to enhance the frequency because the same rail track serves both the AEL as well as the Tung Chung line. So for this particular TYLL, can it have a rail track as well, so that the AEL and the Tung Chung line can run on separate tracks, and then we can enhance the frequency of the Tung Chung line? If this is not your idea, why? And then for my one, on the map, I see 4 columns or 4 piers for the bridge. Will they really be there? Will there be an impact on the mariculturalists? Have you carried out a detailed impact study? And then for the Tsing Bridge on the map, I really hope that there will be a landing on Yi-Lantau, and it should be connected with Castle Peak Road, so that for Yi-Lantau as well as residents in Samjiang, they can also take Tsing Bridge to come out instead of getting stuck in the area around Tinkau Bridge. So please consider my suggestions. Please take on board our aspirations when you do the planning. Thank you, Director. Well, first question, whether we can have a rail track on the TYLL. It is a trunk road. We will also meet the demand for traffic by the logistics industry. For trunk and rail, the technical requirements are different. Like the gradient as well as the bends are different. And then, of course, we have to consider the heights as well as the locations of connection with existing rail tracks as well as roads. So if you want to have both in the TYLL project, I'm afraid we can't accommodate that. And then for the CDD as well as the PD, there was a study in the year 2021 June. There was a detailed design study, and then we considered the connection with the Hong Kong Island, Legislative and the artificial islands. We try to prioritize the connections. we try to facilitate traffic to and from the artificial islands, and we want to ease the pressure on the link between Lantau, Northwest NT, and the urban area. For Mark 1 reclamation, we will certainly carry out a fisheries impact study. And for the EIA, we have to make sure that the requirements are satisfied. We can get the approval. So you don't need to worry, Mr. Chen, for the fisheries. We will certainly pick up this point. If necessary, we'll talk to you or the relevant mariculturalists.
Regarding the connecting road, we heeded your demand. For Route 11, the investigation study has already taken into account your demand. After the results, we will get in touch with you. The next one. Mr. Tong Li-Tse. Thank you, Chair. First, we definitely want this to happen faster. After 4 years of study, and if they are to be undertaken simultaneously, as mentioned in the document, in relation to the timetable, have you already factored in the relevant ordinances, including EIA ordinance? Has it been simplified? Or is it now related to the existing statutory requirements? On page 11, there is a remark below. In the footnote, the capacity was reduced to 0.5. That is to say, the VC ratio is reduced to 0.5. When will we achieve, well, that is to say, reach saturation point? Thirdly, some figures. We have been undertaking a lot of these studies from 2018. How many consultancy firms have undertaken these studies? Do we have enough companies in Hong Kong to undertake these kind of studies? If manpower is tight, we will be very likely be dragging our feet. The second question I will defer to Mr. To. Our 4-year program has already factored in the EIA as well as the impact of expediting the project. Regarding further room to make it more compact, it will depend on whether we will receive any objection upon get settled. Fewer objections mean more room to make it more compact. It means that we can further compress the time, and we will start with the detailed designs, and we will not wait for further procedures. We are doing these in parallel in order to compress the time. Please rest assured. In relation to consultancy firm, we have been maintaining a close dialogue with the firms. We will definitely consider their manpower as well. We will only accept their tender if they have enough manpower. We have already fully factored in their manpower situation. I'd like figures starting from 2018. There have been a lot of consultancy studies. I'd like figures. Which one got the tender? Any more figures in this regard? They are all open information. I will provide figures after the meeting. Mr. To. Lantau Link, morning peak hours, traffic will achieve 0.5. That is the VC ratio will achieve 0.8. Based on the design in 2023, we remember that this figure will increase. We also have to know that we will have a set of parallel roads, a network upon the commissioning of works. So motorists will be more incentivized to use the roads mentioned. We have to take a look at the projects in tandem. These two roads will not reach saturation point. But of course, in the next stage, we will review whether this preliminary traffic study comparing with the prevailing traffic conditions. The next one, Mr. Andrew Lam. The function of this route is actually very clear. It will connect to Route 11 for facilitating the development of Hongshui-Kyo, relieving the traffic there. For southbound and eastbound traffic, the relieving effect is on the surface clear. However, you're focusing on Tsing-Sha Highway, that is to say, northwest New Territories, without figures. The original congestion points are just moved to yet another point. I'd like to have more information in relation to the traffic pressure on the connection point. And what is your evaluation? What is your assessment? Apart from current roads, our projects include widening prevailing roads. That is to say, we will widen the roads on both sides. Thus, there will be no congestion. Tsing-Yi connection will also widen the relevant roads in order to satisfy the needs. Therefore, there will not be a bottleneck. To be more concrete, what about the current VC ratio and the capacity? Do you have any concrete figures which you can share with us? Thank you for your question. When it comes to planning roads, apart from taking a look at new roads, we will also take a look at the roads in the downstream. Of course, apart from connecting the roads, we will also widen 2 lanes so that they can successfully connect Tsing-Yi and North Legislative. That is to say, we will move the roads to the west, vacating space on both lanes so that Tsing-Yi and North Legislative will have roads being connected. This can relieve the traffic congestion situation. In relation to Namwan Tunnel, that is to say, the downstream traffic. That is to say, the current VC ratio is just 0.8 and 0.4. Therefore, there is definitely enough capacity to accommodate the traffic that we expect will arise therefrom. This is the preliminary traffic study. This traffic study will be reviewed in the next stage. We aim to ensure that roads in the downstream will have traffic congestion when there is a new route. The next one, Mr. Chen. With the intake of population increasing, the government has decided to construct a Tsing-Yi-Lantau link to connect it to the city. I speak in support of this because it can further refine the traffic network and it can also boost economic development. I'd like to follow up on several matters. The first one on tolls. Tsing-Yi-Lantau link, the investigation study and the detailed design. The figure is estimated to be $730 million. This is not a small amount. In relation to on-site inspection, the fee is estimated to be $550.4 million. And the other, well, there is complexity to each and every different project, and we cannot draw comparisons directly. However, for the expense, well, that is to say, for the project cost of $730 million, this is quite a staggering figure. So what is the ratio of investigation study and detailed design? What is the main reason for such a very high figure? Members would like to increase efficiency, quality, as well as speed. If citizens have to wait for a decade to use the trunk road, this is not within the expectations of the citizens. Tsing Bridge took 6 years, and this is actually similar. But then Tsing Bridge was a project some 2 decades ago. We shouldn't draw comparisons directly. When it is commissioned, the whole road network should have come into place at the same time. Tsing Yi-Lantau link, well, this is not a very easy to read name. Do you have a more simple name so that we will not find it difficult to read the name of the project? 4 questions. The funding is for detailed design as well as investigation study. Route 11 was investigation study. After the investigation study, we still have to come back to LegCo for yet another funding. We'd like to expedite the progress so that we are applying for both at the same time, so we can take it forward faster. And that is why this figure is larger. We have already included on-site inspection, including marine anchorage and whether it is deep enough below the sea level, as it has a very stringent requirement in this regard. So we have to conduct enough, that is sufficient geotechnical studies in order to make sure the requirements are met. We will undertake that we will do this as soon as possible, as fast as possible. So what about design and investigation study? Can you provide us with the separate ratios after the meeting? Yes. In relation to the name, I will discuss with the relevant authorities. I will discuss with the Transport and Logistics Bureau. The next one, myself. We hope that it could be taken forward as soon as possible. We have already mentioned, as you span over 1 fairway. For the new generation container ship, there are 24 containers right now. It is getting bigger and bigger. And we are looking at the possibility of constructing 30,000 containers. Tsing Bridge has been widened by 2 meters, and I think that there is actually further room for widening. If you include this as well, when you construct a new bridge in the future, it should be at least 59 meters above sea level. I'm talking about air draft. Otherwise, the super container ship would not be able to enter the port. You have a pier, and this is written in the United Dockyard. I'm not sure if you noticed that part of the ship maintenance work is being carried out, but then they are producing a lot of concrete. And they have taken up 25% of the market right now in Hong Kong. Apart from concrete, reinforced steel was also involved. Will you arrange for yet another piece of land to be given to them? Otherwise, the supply of concrete will be affected, which takes up 25%. This has a huge impact on Hong Kong, and hopefully you will have an answer for them. Firstly, regarding the height, we will maintain a close dialogue with the Marine Department, and we will definitely comply with the relevant requirements in relation to height. And we will fully consider it in our investigation study as well as the detailed design. We will also consult the trade. Regarding United Dockyard, we are still in discussion with them. After confirming the alignment, we will discuss with the relevant stakeholders, and hopefully we will have your positive answers afterwards. The next one, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chair. Please allow me to delve into history. Tsing Yi-Lantau link in the last term of the government in a Public Works Subcommittee, as mentioned in paragraph 15 of your document. At that time, in the Finance Committee or the Subcommittee Public Works, this study had to be embedded into the study of Route 11, and I myself was exactly the person tabling this. In November 2018, I wrote a letter to the then chairman, Mr. Chen, of the panel on transport in relation to the then status. The reason why I had to mention this history is that in the last term of the government, well, that is to say in the last term, this TYLL used to be in your investigation, but then it vanished. So in the last term of the government, we proposed including TYLL into the study of Route 11. It was later adopted.
I have to spend time on the history. This is to echo members' concerns. Everybody is trying to ask for a higher speed and higher efficiency in relation to the project. Yes, we do know that you have to take it step by step, but still, you are still giving us 2033 as the date of completion, 10 years. In fact, during the last term government, we asked for this to be incorporated back into Route 11. Currently, you are having the detailed design, but then back and forth, we have been wasting almost 10 years' time or more. I think to me, this is really too slow a pace. Would you consider this? Well, I'm a lay person. I know nothing about engineering. For this Tsing Yi-Lantau link, it used to be part of your earlier study. It went missing, and then during the last term government, with our insistence, it was included. I think it should have been there already, and I don't think you need to spend time to do it afresh. Why don't you start directly? Otherwise, everybody will be wondering why it takes that long. I think you have already done something about it. Probably you have shelved it for a while for one reason or other. So I wonder if you can sort of revive it. I'm a layperson. I must apologize for that. But still, I believe that we share a common aspiration. That is, be more efficient and be faster. Thank you, Chair. Of course, in the year 2009, there was a feasibility study, but then the parameters for development are very different now. When it comes to the building of roads, it is a matter of addressing the traffic demand rather than just building a road. This has changed a lot. We need the information to facilitate our planning. For North Lantau Expressway, we want to know how many vehicles will go downwards and how many will take the Tsing Yi-Lantau link. And then that will decide on the number of lanes to be built. Indeed, there was a preliminary design, but then we have to be more up to date, like the climate change has new requirements on us, and there are changes to the wind tunnel test. So I have to follow the latest requirements when it comes to public works, and that would affect my design as well. Members have all spoken. I haven't encountered anybody objecting to the project. Most of you are in support. The only common aspiration is to have it earlier, and there are a few follow-up questions as well. With that, let's move on to another item. Item 2 on the agenda. Proposed toll plans for road harbour crossings. Please invite the relevant public officers to join us. All right, please press the button if you would like to speak.
我撳咗啦，係啊，我撳咗啦。好歡迎啊！
I would like to welcome Mr. Lam Sai-hong, Secretary for Transport and Logistics, as well as Ms. Rosanna Law, Commissioner for Transport, and their team members for your attendance today. Do you have a presentation for us? I have some opening remarks, Mr. Chairman. My opening remarks are in written form, and that will be forwarded to you after the meeting. Well, the Western Harbour Crossing will have its franchise expiring on the 1st of August 2023. We want to take this opportunity of taking back the WHC to adjust the tolls so as to address the problem of congestion at the road harbour crossings. I would like to brief you on the details. We are a small place. In fact, traffic congestion is a problem we need to address. And then for harbour crossing vehicles, in the past 10 years, we've seen an increase continuously. And in fact, harbour crossing congestion is worsening. With the taking back of the Western Harbour Crossing, we want to adjust the toll levels as well as the toll structure so as to achieve two targets. First of all, rationalize the harbour crossing traffic and better utilize the capacity of the 3 road harbour crossings and change the commuting pattern so as to suppress and divert the excessive traffic demand. I think we have to be pragmatic, and we will adopt a two-phase structure. We have collective views, and then first of all, we are going to address the following point. That is for private cars. There are many of them, and yet they are not efficient. For Western Harbour Crossing, the amount will be lowered by 20% to 60%. And then for the 3 tunnels, we are going to standardize the taxi tolls. And in terms of diverting the traffic, there are 2 important points to bear in mind. First of all, we can narrow the toll differentials among the 3 tunnels. We have been responding actively to the public demand. At the same time, we need to avoid the following, that is, attracting unnecessarily excessive traffic. While lowering the toll of WHC from 75 to 60, we need to enhance those for 6T and HC so as to maintain the overall traffic volume so that it is more or less the same as the existing levels. For private cars, currently, instead of $55, it will now be $30 for the 6T. In other words, more motorists will, in the light of their destinations, choose the right tunnel so as to avoid having detours and ease the burden on 6T and the HC. Secondly, we are going to unify the taxi tools crossing the harbour. Well, for a harbour crossing taxi, throughout the day, a taxi driver would only need to pay $25 only, and this is similar to the surcharge imposed currently. A taxi passenger has to pay for the outbound as well as the return trips, in other words, $50 in total. During the peak hours, taxis account for over 10% of the harbour crossing trips. In this way, we can avoid taxis making detours unnecessarily, and then they can choose those that have less traffic. It will be effective. As to our next target, we would like to encourage the commuters to change their commuting patterns and try to suppress and divert the traffic demand. Within 1 year of getting back WHC, we would like to examine the traffic conditions, and we'll try to see whether our efforts are effective, and then we will introduce time-varying tolls. It is a 2-step approach. In other words, we don't have to adjust the toll levels and structure in one go drastically within a short period of time. Now we're going to have the first step, and then we have to revise the law, and we're going to introduce the concept of time-varying tolls so that in the law we will be making preparation for the second step. When it comes to the time to carry out the second step, we don't need to amend the principal ordinance, and still we can implement the policy. We'll be open to views like park and ride, as well as enhancing public transport. In this way, we can address the problem of harbour crossing congestion. Early next year, we are going to submit a bill to the Legislative so as to amend the relevant legislation. that is to take back the WHC and introduce and implement the proposed toll changes. On this note, I stop, and my team and myself will be happy to take questions from you. 18 of us here, and then many of you would like to speak. In order to let you have more time to speak, and more of you can speak 3.5 minutes each. I don't want to see excessive overrunning of the meeting time, so please be time conscious. Dr. An Men-yu, I'm a directly elected member representing Kowloon East for Kwun Tong. And then on the 11th of December, we have the Chang Kwun O Lam Tin Tunnel. Now, if somebody drives and he is near to the EHC, how would you expect him to go to WHC? But it is still doubling the toll for EHC. Even if there's some congestion, you'll still rather wait in the queue in front of EHC than go to WHC. I think you need to consider the non-peak hour toll. Just now, I have my car cleaned, and I saw a poster. That is, if you leave your car there, it will during the small hours, it will be $100 instead of $140 during the peak hours. Even for a garage owner, he's smart enough to have their time-varying tolls or fees. If the government is not targeted in the solutions, even if we have a multi-step approach, it will be ineffective. So how are you going to lobby for the support of the residents near to EHC? Secretary, we need to take an overall view when it comes to traffic planning. For EHC, 6T, and WHC, of course, it is location specific, and for people living in NT-East or NT-West, they will have their preferences. On this issue, I'm glad to see that Dr. N is in support of the time-varying tolls. But then, in my opening remarks and in the government's paper, I have made it clear, owing to a number of reasons, we need to adopt a two-step approach. The first reason being that for the Hong Kong Yi tolls, we are going to introduce it end of this year or early next year. Well, in fact, for the general public, driving public, they need time to get accustomed to the new arrangements. Say, for example, when we commission a new road, we won't have it on a Monday, usually on a Sunday or during the non-peak hours, so as to allow motorists time to get used to the new arrangements. And therefore, for the time-varying tolls, we are going to have a two-step approach. First of all, every day, we are going to introduce different tolls for different tunnels throughout the day. And then within a year's time, judging from the outcome, and the second factor of consideration is as follows. We are still in the process of becoming normal again, and then the traffic volume hasn't stabilized. We need time to judge the level of traffic after we fully resume normalcy. Then we will collect the data, and then we can be more specific and more targeted in coming up with the time-varying toll levels. Thank you. Mr. Chen Hangban. Thank you, Chair. Well, the community has always been talking about rationalizing the three tunnels. If you try to increase the tolls, you can never solve the problem because the waiting time, the queue, lengths, etc. are different. So the WHC currently can divert the traffic. In due course, you need to lower the toll levels of WHC so as to divert the traffic. I think you can directly go for time-varying tolls. Now, the government would like to have a two-step approach. However, to me, this is problematic. On the one hand, you are increasing the toll levels for some tunnels and reducing the toll level for one. And it is difficult to judge the actual sort of outcome. If you want to have a two-step approach, why don't you try out the time-varying tolls? Say, for example, at night time, you can try to pick a time that is less sensitive to carry out a pilot scheme. Like after the peak hours for tunnel, you try to lower the toll levels for the big C so as to test it. Or during the small hours, you try to have it $10 or $15 across the board. And then you can gather the data to see if the logistics industry will try to shift their operation patterns to the small hours, rather than having your current proposal 60, 30, 30, because the data resulting cannot really tell us much.
And they even have to pay 60 in the evening. I hope the government can consider whether this proposal has any room for improvement. And I hope that the administration will have a response in this regard. I have already heeded the view of Mr. Chan. And this is actually quite in line with the ultimate goal of our two-step approach. As I have explained, we think the two-step approach have grounds. Let me call it 633 a proposal. First of all, after taking over the WHC, the toll reduction is as expected by the public. However, we have to pay attention if we reduce the toll by a very great margin. This will increase the travel flow in the WHC. There are 3 lanes in the WHC, but actually it does not have a very good capacity. So 633 proposal, we have another way. If we suitably adjusted upward the tolls of EHC and CHT, well, sorry for butting in. In non-peak hours, if you reduce the toll in the WHC to help relieve the traffic in the CHT, this is actually a direct approach. We hope that the administration can take this into consideration. Thank you. We have listened to review. We have taken it. Next one, Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. People are living in difficulty with poor economy. I don't think we should increase the toll to solve the problem. Can we actually divert the traffic in peak hours to non-peak hours? This might be more effective. A two-step approach is a more glorious term, but then when I take a look at the papers, this is actually asking us to take the first step first. There is a mechanism the government can, having regard to the traffic conditions, adjust the price, the tolls. If this mechanism is in place, then you can take the second step at any time. You can actually increase the toll whenever you want. So I'd like to know what this mechanism is. Is it a tool allowing you to increase the toll whenever you want? In this connection, member, you are right in the sense that when amending the principal legislation, we will introduce an adjustment mechanism. For details, I'd like to defer to the Commissioner for Transport. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for your question. As the power is invested with the Commissioner for Transport, let me explain. The specific contents will be made clear to you early next year when the principal legislation is put into effect. We have a cumulative ceiling. For example, $10, $15, etc. We can only implement this with the approval of the legislators, this will not be a substantial increase. It will just be a minor adjustment. We will not recommend adjusting, for example, upward by $10 or $15. It will only be a very small margin, for example, $2, $3. When there is mild traffic flow above the capacity, we can make adjustments for unstable traffic conditions. In different time periods, when we need to adjust it, we have already embedded these pieces of legislation. So, responding to what Mr. Lau said, whether we are going to increase it in the future, this will not be the case. We will only be able to implement this when we have your approval. There would definitely be checks and balances. Well, I think this is quite dangerous. Without knowing about the adjustment mechanism clearly, when we add this adjustment mechanism in the first stage, so that the government does not need to amend the legislation before they can adjust the tolls, this mechanism, in my opinion, is not ideal. I understand Mr. Lau's concerns, but then the Commissioner has already said that you have to bank on legislation for this to be taking effect. There is still time. Mr. Edward Lang, you will have a model before you can achieve effective diversion. However, no one will go from the CHT to the WHC to achieve the purpose of diversion, to prevent the government from just making gases. Can we know whether the government has interviewed any other people? How many people will go from how many people have gone from the WHC to the CHT or from the EHC to CHT? We will need to know what facts you're basing on to tell us that it can actually achieve the effect of diversion. Thank you. In a moment, I will ask Mr. Tony Yao from the Transport Department to respond to this. As I said in my opening remarks, the differentials to the motorists, apart from the toll levels, they will also consider the differentials of different tolls in two tunnels. That gives that person the incentive to change from one tunnel to another. Thank you, Mr. Lang, for your question. Our transport model, basically, for all development projects or transport projects, we are also basing on that transport model. For general transport assessment reports, we are also basing on the same model. For example, by commercial property offices, we can decide on the starting point and the end point. Then we can, having regard to their income level of the household, determine whether that person uses which mode of transport so that we can conjecture which mode of transport they choose. And the commuting patterns will probably have something to do with their incomes, family environments, etc. When we increase the toll in the CHT and decreased the toll in the WHC, the transport model is being updated in relation to commuting patterns. For the difference from $50 to $30, some people might change their commuting patterns. For example, when I pay $75 to use the WHC, I will continue. And when I pay $20 to use the CHT, I will also continue probably. When it comes to 633 proposal, we think that some may change to the 30 regime. So when we take forward the second stage to change the commuting pattern, this will be very useful. Does it mean that for 633 proposal was not backed with any interview? For example, you didn't interview 3,000, 2,000 people. As citizens do not think that it can achieve the function of diversion, how can you convince me that this will be useful? I do not know why you can just rely on the computer without any regard to how citizens think, and you just disregarded all citizens' views. Mr. Tong Yao, we are actually very careful. In peak hours, the WHC has reached saturation point. There are a lot of opinions asking us not to take back the WHC, which will not give rise to further traffic flow. Despite increased traffic flow in the WHC, there will not be further increased traffic flow from, for example, Yau Tin Mong, Route 3, etc. After Stanley Lee made remarks, I will have to draw the line. The proposal, well, we are actually skipping the procedures of medicine. Instead, we are going directly to the core of the surgery. You are going to increase the toll, but then this does not necessarily achieve the purpose of diversion. As a directly elected member in the East and South Northern, New Territories, some drivers will also take Keynes Tunnel, and in the next month, Changquano Lam Tin Tunnel will be commissioned. This will lead them to the entrance of the EHC. According to the proposal, however, if you would like to increase the toll of the EHC, the citizens living in the vicinity are actually innocent. Let us take a look at the map. People using the EHC will not just switch to the CHT given the same price, because the CHT has a more serious traffic congestion problem than the EHC. As it takes fuel, it takes petrol, it will not achieve the effect of diversion. In the meantime, you also need to have a good package. For example, for park and ride, you will also have to implement this well. The East Rail is now in operation. As a Taipo resident, I also take the MTR to come back to Legislative. Indeed, it is convenient. However, there are no good packages attracting me, incentivizing me to take the MTR to go to work on a daily basis. Will the administration consider when the whole package is in place, then you will consider the proposal of diversion? I have heeded the view of Mr. Stanley Lee. Just like my response to other members, when we work on traffic, we take a holistic approach. For example, in East New Territories, 3 tunnels might also be one of my options. So in a lot of cases, in a lot of scenarios, whether it be the structure or the toll levels, we hope that we can achieve the effect of diversion. Chair and Mr. Yao have also mentioned the 633 proposal. There will be more vehicles coming out from the WHC. However, at the same time, the CHT and the WHC, the difference dropped from $55 to $30. So some people might change their commuting patterns from one tunnel to another. Secondly, in relation to taxi, they have a standardized price throughout the day across the board, so they do not have to choose which tunnel to take. This can also facilitate diversion. Next one, Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen Hao-feng, thank you, Chair. The adjustment on this occasion is rare in the sense that no one is happy. Those using the WHC, EHC, and the CHT are not happy either. This is rather groundbreaking in this sense.
Well, I think the government is not really making an informed choice. The government talks about having a lot of data. We don't have it in the paper. Upon the adjustment, by how much will the traffic demand be cut? We don't know. To what extent are we saving time? Again, you haven't told us. However, it will be $60. It is like going to the wet market and you don't have a firm basis to make a decision on toll levels. How can I support you? And what's the ultimate purpose of having the two-step approach? I think you are merely paving way for the toll increase in the second stage. Mr. Lam, Secretary, I'm afraid none of us is happy. We expect that when the government takes back the WHC, we will be happy in that there will be a solution to the traffic problem. But then when you take back the WHC, it will in turn become a headache. So instead of giving us happiness, it will become an unhappy event. Now, you talk about expecting a change in the traffic volume, but how and to what extent? It is not backed up by any data. How can you convince me? Secretary, in a moment, Mr. Yao, the Assistant Commissioner, will give a reply. Let me talk about the two-step approach. First of all, the first step is also paving way for the second step. We will be collecting data. Well, once the traffic volume has become stable, then we can make a decision on the second step, that is the time-varying tolls. Mr. Yao, the Deputy Commissioner, can comment on the question on data. Yes, Mr. Tony Yao. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. Well, we are watching a few points here. First of all, as I have said, we need to be holistic. Well, during peak hours, all the three tunnels are reaching 90% of the capacity. We have yet to resume normal traveling. I think the WHC will be more congested when visitors come back. So for the toll adjustments, we don't want to bring in new traffic. That's the first point. Second point, for the WHC, for the holding of vehicles, for CHT, you can have vehicles being held in Princess Margaret Road. For WHC, vehicles come down from Route 3, and then one will go to Tsim Sha Tsui, another will go to Yau Chim Mong, and then the length of the journey is 1.5 km, another 1.6 km. My question is simple. With the proposal, as a motorist, how much time can be saved? You don't need to go to other considerations. Well, currently, the traffic volume has not stabilized, so we need to watch the outcome of the first step, and then we can have a better basis to start the second step. We want to be effective, and we want to control the traffic volume as well. Mr. Zhu Chen, yes, it should be redistributed, but I don't support toll increase, and I don't support the government's approach. For this 633 approach, it is in effect a toll increase proposal. And what about the time-varying tolls? I want to know what we started off with. Let me tell you the truth. For paragraph 3, it says that it is targeting at the private cars. They account for 60% of the traffic volume, but carrying less than 20% of the commuters. You want to have fewer private cars using the tunnels. You want them to rely on public transport. Inflation is running high. I think you are in a good position, favorable position, to encourage people to opt for public transport. You need to encourage people to use public transport, and then we can return wealth to the public, and then we can break the monopoly enjoyed by the MTRCL. but you are not doing this. And then for your policy initiatives, I don't think you should be profiteering. I've always said that you need to have modeling exercises. You can try to see the amount of traffic to be redistributed if you increase the toll or decrease the toll to a certain extent. Now, it is said that the revenue to be reaped by the government will be more or less the same. But again, you're silent on that. So I haven't been convinced at all. Now, you won't have time varying tolls, and then you won't encourage people to stay with WHC if they're in the west, and they stay with HC if they're in the eastern part of the territory. Now, you have to pay more, even for the two other tunnels. So the government is making more money. Well, it is a matter of price inelasticity. In other words, when the prices go up, then the demand will drop, but then to a lesser extent. So people pay more, but it doesn't mean that more people can use the other tunnel. So I just cannot be convinced by the government's justification. Now, for the WHC, you are going to get more revenue from that source. With the 633 approach, I want to know whether the government is getting more revenue. Does the department have data which is objective to convince us? We won't be dismissed by just having a general reply. You always blame it on the fact that the traffic volume is unstable. You need 1 year's time to collect sufficient data. But then on what basis are you sort of deciding on the 633 approach? Don't be double standard. You can't just pluck a figure from thin air. Don't try to repeat the same old answer of having a two-step approach. It is so boring that I was about to leave the conference room. Well, in fact, I've been talking about the 633 approach many times. With the return of the WHC to the government, people are expecting a toll decrease. That's why it is going to become $60. It means that more traffic will be attracted to WHC, and in the vicinity there will be more traffic and there will be a spillover effect. For the other tunnels, it will be $30. It is a toll increase. We hope that by this we can encourage some motorists to go to WHC, and this way we can redistribute the traffic. I think time is up for this round, so I have to move on. Mr. Michael Look, for the toll adjustments, I don't think it is anything that people would thank you for that. It is a thankless job. Even if you decrease the toll levels, they will ask for more. And not to mention that you increase the toll levels. I'm sure it is a headache, a big headache for you. It is a huge challenge for you. For public policies, you need to identify the receiving end. Chair, I have to declare interest. From time to time, I drive my private car, but my principle is that I only drive during the non-peak hours to enjoy the fun of driving. I never drive when it is a peak hour period. For the 3 tunnels, and also the toll levels on the traffic volume, I think we need to give priority to efficiency. And who is efficiency? I think, first of all, public transport passengers. For those riding on a bus, we don't want them to be stuck in the traffic jam. For people on a bus going through the CHT as well as the HC, many of them are grassroots passengers. And then for commercial vehicles, for those in the business sector, for those in the trade unions, we want to have smooth traffic because time is money. And if you ask us to make detours, it is a waste of time, waste of money, waste of fuel, and also it is adding to emissions. Now, the 6T is cheaper, and so there is more traffic there. It is very congested, and then everybody is being attracted to that. For the taxi toll levels, it is going to be unified at $25. It is a good move. For taxi drivers, it means that they have less pressure. Currently, as a result of cost consideration, taxi drivers will always go back to 6T to cross the harbour because it is cheaper. Now they don't have to worry about that because it will be $25 throughout. For commercial vehicles, I hope you will adopt the same philosophy. For commercial vehicles, it is not for our own sake, it is not for our own convenience, it is for the sake of the industry. So for light goods vehicles, medium goods vehicles, and heavy goods vehicles, please tell us when you are going to unify the tolls among the 3 tunnels as well. There's an aspiration of the trade unions. Now for time-varying tolls, CV owners won't favor that. To the operators, it is difficult, especially for the workers. If their bosses tell them to work at night because it is cheaper to go through the tunnels, then it means that we'll be having longer working hours. And then for commercial vehicles, they only account for 10% or so of the tunnel traffic. 60% or more are accounted for by private cars. So you need to target at the private cars. Secretary, please tell the public that you try to have a policy that targets at the private car owners or drivers so that there will be fewer of them or they will be redistributed to another tunnel. Whether it is effective, of course, that's a second issue. Please give us more data. I believe in what the late Deng Xiaoping said. That is, when you practice a certain idea, then it is the best proof. Now you're going to make adjustments to the toll levels. There is $15 less for WHC, and then $10 more for CHT, and $5 more for HC. I think it is more or less acceptable. It is just a statement of opinion, or do you have a question? My point is, can you show us more data to convince us that it will be effective somehow in redistributing the traffic? Some people are worried that it won't be effective at all. I think just now a member has asked a similar question, but I don't think the departments have got the data. Next, Mr. Yang Wen-kit. Thank you, Chair. For the 633 approach, the government has got 2 objectives. First of all, they would like to rationalize the cross-harbour traffic. Second, change the commuting pattern of the private car drivers and suppress their demand. As the Chair has said, what is the expected redistributing effect, and what about suppressing the demand, and to what extent? Again, you are silent on that. It is totally unacceptable. During the peak hours, you want to redistribute the traffic. I think you can never redistribute the traffic evenly. The more even they are, the worse it becomes, because even WHC will become congested. So I don't think the government should advocate the idea of 633. Now for the peak hours, I live in central Kowloon. For Hong Kong, To Kwa Wan, and Wong Tai Sin areas, people would never go to WHC even if it is $50. You need to get stuck in traffic jams in Gascon Road, etc. By that time, I would have already reached my destination. So you don't expect the central Kowloon residents to take the $10 rise without asking questions. In fact, you don't need to create a headache for yourself. For our group, we have got this idea. It can redistribute the traffic, but then that is not going to apply during the peak hours. It's for the non-peak hours. WHC, $30. The same for the other 2 tunnels. For the evening or night hours, 15 across the board. So during the non-peak hours, people will be encouraged to use the spare capacity of WHC. In this way, we can achieve the redistribution effect. That's much better than 633. 633 is in effect a toll increase proposal. Now, $15 less for WHC, but then you have $10 more for CHC and $5 more for HC. The government is going to get more revenue. The government is taking the lead to increase the tolls. I don't think it is fair to the public. Thank you. Secretary. Well, thank you, Chair. I think just now the member mentioned other alternative options like time-varying tolls and etc. Well, that would be considered. during the second step, I would say that it is of great reference value. Mr. Chairman, he always talked about the second step. Why don't you do it as part of the first step approach? When I reply the questions from other members, I've made this point. I will repeat myself. For the Hong Kong e-toll, end of this year, beginning next year, that will be introduced to Hong Kong tunnels. We need to give the motorists time to get used to this new arrangement. If we have the time-varying tolls to be introduced this year as well, we are a bit worried that motorists may not be able to get familiar with the new arrangements.
We are returning to normality in terms of traffic flow. The flow is not stable yet. So we need more time to observe the stability of the traffic flow before we can holistically review the toll levels when it comes to time-varying tolls. Thank you, Chair. Secretary, you say that we have to wait until traffic flow is stabilized, but then this is not happening as economic activities are changing every year. When can the traffic flow can become stable? Next one, Mr. Chen Xiu-Hong. The government proposed the toll changes. I think that it is neither here nor there. It cannot achieve the effect of rationalizing tolls, changing commuting patterns, as well as solving the problem of traffic congestion. As Mr. Yang said, we are afraid that when the EHC and the CHT have tolls increases, motorists will definitely have complaints. This is falling between two stools, neither here nor there. Members targeting 633 proposal of the government raise questions. That is to say, what is the basis of the study? Any basis? If the government just randomly increases the tolls, can you show us some scientific backing? For example, an increase of $10 or $5 will lead to more motorists to choose other tunnels, or they would just give up on driving. I think that we should discuss matters in the Legislative Council rationally. I do not want to give out the impression that whenever there is a toll increase, we will object. If you can show the effect of toll increases, why would we not support you? Secretaries mentioned a couple of times why we do not think that time-varying tolls should be implemented. Well, that is to say they have to wait for the traffic flow to become stable before they can review it. We actually have them in all tunnels. Some just pay and go through the tunnels. I do not think that we have to wait until the patterns of the citizens change. In contrast, if you really have to incentivize motorists to change their patterns, time-varying tolls are actually the most effective. The WHC will only be taken over in August. You still have 8 months. Do not underestimate technology or how well citizens can accept things. Whether it be commercial vehicles or private cars, they will find the best way to make the best use of the tunnels. Especially during peak hours, we cannot redistribute the traffic flow. We can give motorists choice in non-peak hours traffic. This is actually favorable. If it is not, please explain to us once again. In a short period of time, we were talking about adaptability. We are actually in the course of resuming to normality. Travel has not resumed fully yet. Cross-boundary travel has not resumed fully yet either. That is why I mentioned the traffic flow is not stable yet because of time constraints. I will not recap my answers to other members. One quick remark. On returning to normality, in non-peak hours, this will not lead to any burden. We have to make good use of the non-peak hours to better utilize the traffic flow. Even a child must have heard about the story of fox eating a sausage, but then a sausage has to be distributed fairly, evenly. Otherwise, the fox would gobble up the whole sausage. But I understand that the government does not want to eat all sausages of citizens. The government indeed wants to solve the problem of traffic congestion of the 3 tunnels. But then, unless the capacity can increase, I do not see any reasons why the 633 proposal will benefit. That is to say, will change the commuting patterns of the drivers. With the fuel prices being so high, and if you increase the tolls by $20, $30, even when the motorists are very broke, this will not an important factor. It really depends on the convenience. In my opinion, you should have taken a holistic view. For the across-the-board adjustment in terms of taxi, a lot of members express support. This is indeed a good mechanism. But why can't you do more about commercial vehicles? When it comes to light goods vehicle to convey goods, $80 for the WHC and $15 for the CHT. Why would they go to the WHC then? You have to think if you want to incentivize more vehicles to use the WHC. If it is $15 for the WHC, well, for the CHT and $200 for the WHC, how can we sensibly make adjustments? So, I do not object to more tools being used for adjustments. However, giving such tools, can we take more steps? Otherwise, we are neither here nor there. When the sausage is bitten twice, then people will just have more complaints. They will be more satisfied. I'm actually being good in order, well, to ask you to take more steps. Some people might think that it will work, whereas some people might think that it is not. It actually troubles citizens. So at this stage, when it comes to commercial vehicles, we should do a little bit more. So please explain to us why you are not changing this in this bracket. I will defer to the Commissioner for Transport in relation to the question just now. Indeed, for commercial vehicles, Mr. Low and Mr. Lok, we have quite a lot of changes. We also have a lot of exchanges with the chairman. We have received a lot of views. By and large, it is about efficiency, and we receive support for rationalizing the tolls. We take 2 steps, and the first step is on taxi. We thank legislators, members for your support, and we will march forward along this line. In the second stage, when we deal with commercial vehicles, using the same principle, we would like to use the same principle as well. We propose that you can, well, do a little bit more in the first stage with commercial vehicles to have a better effect, then you can take it far. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to solicit support. Ms. Lam So Wai. Thank you, Chair. For the 60, 30, and 30 proposal, I expressed disappointment with the response from the administration. The tolls adjustments in relation to the 3 tunnels cannot solve the total capacity of the traffic flow. Instead, it will also lead to traffic congestion in all 3 tunnels. Prices are actually very high. Inflation is running high. It is difficult for citizens to accept this. As a directly elected legislator, Sai Kung, Ma On-shan, citizens have a lot of opposing views. As motorists are not earning much, they are just from the grassroots. They are just using the private transport to commute. So when they take the Changquan-Lam-Tin tunnel, they will definitely have to use the EHC. They will not take a detour to use the WHC or the CHT. So to the citizens, they are actually going to take this without any complaint. They have no choice. You are actually increasing the economic burden on citizens in terms of redistribution of traffic flow. It is impossible for you to redistribute the flow. Instead, will you actually construct a false RHC, especially for Sai Kung citizens? That is to say, you have to construct a tunnel to divert the traffic. Otherwise, you cannot relieve the problem. You have to build one that can, that is to say, from Changquan-O to east of Hong Kong Island. In peak hours, we agree that the tolls remain unchanged. For non-peak hours, rather, there should be a reduction in order to encourage citizens to use different tunnels. In the small hours, we advocate a standardized amount of $15 across all 3 tunnels so as to give citizens more choices. Right now, 2 tunnels, that is to say the EHC and the CHT, have 126% of the traffic flow, and we cannot achieve the function of diversion. Please do not separate them into 2 steps. Please do it at one go. Make it one shot. I'm glad to know that members support the concept of time-varying tolls. Regarding the 4th RHC, we are planning in KYC Artificial Islands, which leads to Hong Kong Island. Of course, it takes time. In our transport planning, I have to emphasize that we have to take a holistic approach. Traffic congestion in all 3 tunnels was mentioned, as you may have noticed, several years ago. The WHC was smooth, whereas for the remaining 2 tunnels had serious congestion problems, which would negatively impact on motorists not using the tunnels. So when we can rationalize tunnel fees, whether using public or private transportation to cross the harbor, they will have a shorter trip time, and this will go a long way towards minimizing societal cost. Thank you, Chair. As a Kowloon West legislator, the WHC was not mentioned. The government proposed 60-30-30 proposal as the first step, right from the onset. For those living in Meifu, Changsha-Huan, Namchang, Olympic, they are glad to see the reduction from $70 to $60. However, the greatest nightmare is that they will have traffic flow being directed from the CHT to the WHC. 98%, well, the meager 2% will, because of the adjustment, congest the WHC. That is the only means they can pay for time, but then it will also become congested. This is a nightmare. Members ask, what is the basis for the 60-30-30 proposal? Any data, any impact on future traffic? But then, as I heard, no actual figures were provided. How many more vehicles? Any fewer vehicles? Or even to the EHC, there is no figure. I haven't heard any statistics. In this sense, it would be difficult to give citizens a peace of mind. Regarding non-peak hours, a lot of citizens living in Kowloon West, they do not want to take the WHC because of the high toll. They would rather use the CHT, probably to save tens of bucks. They just have to spend a little bit more time. So for the current toll mechanism, they do not have incentive to use the WHC. If there is indeed an incentive, then tell me. For now, I didn't see any, so I'm quite concerned. 60-30-30 proposal will affect the traffic flow in the WHC. Regarding the two-step approach, we have been asking, why do we have to split it into two steps? C15 plus. Well, it will be implemented in two phases. It takes time for people to get used to it. Why do you not take it in one go? We have great adaptability. If we take it in two steps, I am afraid that you will have greater responses, that is to say, more opposing views. I hope that the government listens to us. We genuinely hope that the three tunnels in different time periods can have diversified traffic flow in order to relieve the problem of traffic congestion.
Secretary, keep your answer brief. Yes, I'll be brief in my reply. As I have said, well, for Mr. Leung, for your suggestion, I'm sure it is of huge reference value for our second step. For the 633 approach, as I have said, of course, for either EHC or 6T, traffic can go to WHC. It can also help with the case of the taxis. Thank you. Mr. Chow, upon the return of WHC to the government, it will be $25 for taxis, $60 for WHC. But for commercial vehicles, no change at all. What is the logic? Secretary, please don't tell us that you just want to target at the private cars in relation to the adjustment of traffic flow, and so you ignore the case of commercial vehicles. For WHC, let's take a look at the toll levels. For goods vehicles, light goods vehicles, $15 for 6T, $10 for public light buses and public single-deck buses. But then for WHC, $85 for public and private light buses, $140 for coaches. So we are paying excessively and for a long time. For our industry, including the workers, we all look forward to the day that the WHC is returned to the government, and then there will be a downward adjustment of the tolls, and then our burden will be eased, and then the business environment will be better for the benefit of both the employers and employees. Why won't the government take this opportunity to adjust and lower the unreasonably high toll levels? Second point is about the case of the franchised buses. For WHC, I want to know whether you will waive the franchise buses from the toll of $200 for each trip, like in the case of other government tunnels. And then for the money saved, are you going to allow the bus companies to benefit the bus passengers? In this way, you can encourage a higher patronage of Harbour crossing buses. I would defer to the Commissioner for Transport in relation to the Harbour crossing buses. Yes, let me take the question about buses. To answer Mr. Chow's question, after taking back WHC, irrespective of the toll levels, for buses, just like the case of other government tunnels, the money collected will go to the stabilization fund. In other words, bus companies have to pay for the tolls, but then the money won't go into the general revenue. It will go into the fare stabilization fund, so that we have a piggy bank, so that in case the bus companies would like to see a fare increase, we have money to serve as a buffer. That would be for the benefit of the general public. Chair, now that we want to encourage the private car owners to switch to public buses, franchise buses, are you going to use this money to subsidize the Harbour crossing bus fares? Chair, if you want to have a dedicated fund from dedicated source of money, it's a separate issue. But I'm sure bus passengers will benefit because the money will go into the fare stabilization fund. And for the case of the commercial vehicles, the trade unions' concern is noted. We'll try to implement the second step as early as possible. Next, Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Chair. According to the paper, there will be a two-step approach upon the return of the WHC to the government, so that we can redistribute the traffic flow among the 3 tunnels. Now we are in the course of resuming normalcy. I think we should make good use of the coming 12 months, and we should re-examine the traffic data, in particular when we reopen to the mainland. And then we can try the time-varying tools. We should get ready for that. I am in support of the two-step approach, and it should be implemented as early as possible. Now, for the first step, which incorporates the 633 approach, there are still a lot of worries. Can this really redistribute the traffic among the tunnels? There are doubts. I think it is understandable because the paper doesn't give us convincing data. The government would like to adjust the tunnel tolls. I think the main purpose should be as follows: improve traffic management and improve the motorist experience instead of increasing government revenue. Now I come to my question, or I have to add a word here. For taxis, just like other members, I am in support of the change. I hope this can be applied to other classes of vehicles as well. Now, 3 months after the introduction of the proposed toll changes, if we don't see any significant change, will the government immediately change the tolls as soon as possible? Do you have a fallback position? Do you have a plan B, so that in case that you don't see any significant improvement in 3 months' time, you can fall back on plan B? And then for step 1, can you implement Hong Kong e-toll so that we can streamline the payment process? Thank you, Mr. Yim, for his question. He mentioned about whether we had a fallback position in 3 months' time. We need a two-step approach. This is all because the traffic volumes have not stabilized. This is because we are still on our way to normalcy. For the tourism industry, it hasn't become normal again, and cross-boundary traffic hasn't resumed its earlier levels. So once the traffic volume has stabilized, we'll see how we're going to introduce the second step, in particular for the peak hours. We'll try to see how we can introduce the time-varying tolls so that we can effectively deal with the question of traffic congestion. So if you talk about a 3-month review, well, that will be part of our sort of reviewing period. And that's why we have been saying that give us 1 year's time to collect data, and then we can move on to the second step. I hope this I can answer Mr. Yim's question. Do you have a plan B? Do you have a plan B? a fallback position. So are you ready with a plan B? As I have said, when it comes to traffic, when it comes to the volumes, it takes time to monitor the situation. It's now my turn. For taxis, the tolls will be unified. For the frontline taxi drivers, it is believed that they will be happier to take harbour crossing passengers. There's also another concern. They want to make it $15 for each trip, $30 for the return trip instead of $25 for a single trip. So, Secretary, please consider, other than changing the taxi tolls for public transport, it is hoped that upon the taking back of the WHC during the first step, it is hoped that the toll levels can come down as well. For WHC, $200 per trip via WHC. If you take into consideration fuels, depreciation, driver's wages, etc., you need 43 passengers on board before you can break even. So why don't you take this opportunity of taking back WHC to look at the case of the commercial vehicles, in particular the public transport vehicles? Well, I agree with what Dr. Loh Wai Kwok has said. That will be better in terms of redistribution of traffic. So do consider my proposal. I come to my third point. Our industry has said that other than making changes to the toll levels, there should be other measures to encourage patronage of the public transport. Say, for example, a bus-only lane, and also more bus-bus interchange facilities and arrangements so that citizens won't drive to the urban area and won't use the tunnels while driving their own vehicles. I hope you can give a more detailed answer in the future. Let me also make a point. I'm a motorist, I'm a driver. Whenever I drive back to the Legislative, I will make a decision between the WHC or the CHT. If I'm in a hurry, then I will certainly opt for WHC. The price difference is $55. In future, $633. It's easier for me to make a decision. As soon as there is some slight traffic jam, I will quickly switch over to WHC. So there will certainly be some diversion effect. It depends on the starting point, the point of origin, as well as the point of destination for the motorists. Now, if you have some favorable changes for commercial vehicles and public transport, I'm sure the diversion effect will be even more significant. Now, we aren't asking for anything drastic. Even if a change of 10%, the situation will improve on either side. So that's my observation. Secretary, do you have anything to say? Thank you for your suggestions, Chairman. We will certainly consider your suggestion as to whether there are other support measures to encourage patronage of public transport. This is our ongoing task. For example, park and ride. We try to provide parking facilities to encourage park and ride. For other support measures, we'll try best to consider them as well. Next, Mr. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chair. Secretary, you made 3 points today. First of all, you have my support about unifying the tolls for taxis. Second, 2 steps instead of having 1 step and having toll adjustments as well as the changes in the toll structure. You are worried that people can't adapt to that. You have my support. And then the third one is about the toll changes. Now, for private cars, we know what the toll changes are. Now, for WHC, it will be almost 4 times if when compared to using the 6T. Now, for many years, it is like providing an automatic cash withdrawing machine. I don't think it is fair. Before the year 2019, for the previous government, it is said that making it 50-40-40 from the current 75-20-25 would be best, because it will be even distribution and even congestion as well. But then the total is 130. I don't agree. The total should remain at 120. So for us in the round table, the only acceptable option would be 50, 35, 35. Now, if you say that it is going to have serious congestion at the WHC, it means that you don't agree with the calculations of the previous term government. I don't know the basis that you adopted for your calculation. For 60, it is always the most direct route, shorter trips. WHC, longer trips, and $30 more every day, $700 a month. Not everybody will switch over to WHC. If there is a miracle that you're proved to be right, so that all the 60 users will opt for WHC, then it means that WHC will be congested. But then they are not fools. They would rather save $700. They would rather remain with 60. It is a free market. Everybody will know what's best for him or her. Now, don't forget that for WHC, you have this bypass, the central Wan Chai bypass, and it is a good choice with smooth traffic.
And, well, however congested the other two tunnels are, honestly, 75, 25, 20, you could have not adjusted them. I do not understand the principle. If you really want to divert the traffic, then you have to believe that even congestion is commonly what society wants to see. If you remain at 60-30-30, I would definitely not support it. But then I would support 50, 35, 35. I'm all for it. Because of time constraint, just a little bit to add. Mr. Maikutin mentioned 50, 40, 40. That was a couple of years ago. At that time, the WHC had some 90% of the traffic flow, but then now it increased. So 50, 40, 40 and a 633 proposal cannot be compared at the same time. Okay, members, it's the appointed time. I exercise my discretion as a chairperson to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Three more members to go. Without objection, I will allow all three members to ask the questions before we call it a day. For Mr. Gary Zhang, the administration said that we have to play it safe. We have to obtain more data. This is, of course, well, no problem, but then you can actually take the course of toll reduction. You do not have to go by toll increase. At the same time, you can obtain citizen support. As we mentioned, the general traffic flow is not stable right now. When the traffic flow is not stable, it is exactly the right time in non-peak hours traffic to make adjustments. After the tolls are changed, there will be disruption. There will be interference. It will make it more difficult for you to collect data in relation to commuting patterns. If you would like more accurate data in C15+, this is exactly what we factor in. So what we are changing are the WHC tolls. Instead, we are not changing the tolls in the EHC and CHT. Mathematically or scientifically, we are keeping the other variables unchanged. And I believe that those doing engineering will definitely agree. In terms of adaptability, when only WHC is changing, drivers will find it easier to adapt to them. So you're only changing the tolls of one tunnel. It will be easier for them to adapt to it. A lot of members in principle agree to the direction of our proposal. The Secretary also agrees that our directions are of value, and we hope that we can take the two-step approach with, well, a way that more citizens support. Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for your views. For time-varying tolls, there is general support. Just the pace is a little bit different. In my response to members' questions, I mentioned there are several factors at play. First, when motorists are adapting to Hong Kong e-toll, and for time-varying tolls, we have to tread more cautiously. When it comes to unstable traffic flow, I have repeatedly answered this question. The difference between us and Mr. Zhang is that whether the first step has to put in place time-varying tolls. This is really a difference of steps, of pace. In the second stage, we will definitely take reference from your opinions, from your views. We know that you have spent a lot of efforts in this proposal, and you have backing to support your views. Therefore, in the second stage, I would definitely take on board your proposal. However, for the first stage, the reason why we think 633 proposal can solve the problem is that we are glad to see that the 65 tolls of the WHC is acceptable, but then at the same time, we hope that against this backdrop, the toll differentials from $55 to $35 can be conducive to diversion of traffic flow, and we hope that with taxi can also aid to solve the traffic congestion problem. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I agree with paragraph 5 of the discussion paper. That is to say, the principle and objective of adjusting tolls, how to maximize the capacity of the tolls. The total traffic flow exceeds 100% of the capacity. Above all, whether we can reduce traffic flow of private cars in peak hours, or we can discourage other motorists from using the tunnels. In relation to 633 proposal, I think it might not have very obvious significant results. When we talk about the 3 tunnels, when 2 tunnels have toll increase, not talking about decrease, we just talk about tolls increase. Some members said that we can actually reduce the tolls. Will this make unnecessary, motorists who do not find it necessary to use private cars to use public transportation? If the differential is small, definitely the result will not be great. However, if you further raise the tolls, this is bound to be opposed by a lot of members of the public, especially given the current economic situation. I do not object to the 2-stage approach, but then I'm concerned about the effectiveness and the time of implementation. Chair, I agree indeed with you. How to incentivize more motorists to use Harbour crossing buses, despite the fund. 200 and tens of dollars, they are of course different. So what is their preference? That is to say, when they use less WHC. This is actually the best to citizens, as more people might use the WHC. I agree with Mr. Low as well. Can you take more steps given the large difference? Time-varying tolls are supposedly good, as you can make optimal use, but then it is probably not feasible today in the small hours right now. Whether it be before or after the epidemic, the usage rate is actually low. For instance, $5, $10, is it possible? But then some people say that will bosses force employees to work only at night, in the evening? But then I think, would it be possible? Just tens of dollars and bosses have to force employees to do so? What about toll decreases? There are a lot of reductions. That is just a political concern. This is my personal view. I hope that in this regard, there can be policies which incentivize people to take buses to cross the harbor. In relation to buses, I will defer to the Commissioner for Transport. Thank you, Chair. For buses, by contrast, bus routes have to be approved by the Transport Department. Bus operators have to discuss with us before they can decide on which tunnel to use. And I can share with you, tolls are not a concern. Bus operators do not avoid choosing the WHC just because there is a lower toll. Instead, they would prefer the WHC because there is actually more congestion in the CHT. So, after rationalizing the toll levels in 3 tunnels in rush hours, traffic flow of buses can be planned better. Or is there any way we can encourage citizens to take public transportation? So providing good bus service is actually very important. In relation to the use of vehicles or those from the trade unions, they are different, and this is exactly why we would tread cautiously in the second stage, the last one, Mr. Andrew Lam. For C15+, I will not repeat the proposal, and I believe that it was already mentioned by other members. On some principles, I'd like to share with you. At the end of the day, when it comes to road traffic management, there are several principles. First of all, I support the use of technology, and I think that it is crucial. Tools indeed are an effective means. Theoretically, when you charge $10,000 per tunnel, then people will not use it. So definitely, there will be a result. But then when we take a look at the government policies, there are several points that I'd like to mention with my own views. So what is the focus of the diversion of traffic flow? If we are just talking about peak hours, basically the 3 tunnels, as you know, have already reached saturation point. However, you're going to distribute them. The effect is still limited, so you have to divert it to other time periods, to other means of transport, that is to say public transportation. However, they were not covered by the government policies. If you have to take a 2-step approach, there are a lot of different considerations at play. I'm not going to say I agree, but then I do understand. If we have to take a 2-step approach, what can we test with a 633 proposal? I have pondered over it for a long period of time, but then I still do not understand. As Mr. Gary Zhang said, if you adjusted all 3 figures, so what is the criterion of assessment? If the results are not great enough, is it because of the narrow differential? Is the difference not too great? We do not have an objective standard, without which I do not understand what it is aiming at. I give it 1 more year, and next year, when we come back, and if we all agree with time-varying tolls, and by that time we can amend the legislation. So why do we not first finish the framework first before we make adjustments as to the specifics, how we can make adjustments with the framework? Why do we not refine it first? Why do we not finish it first? this can also deliver a clear message to the public. In contrast, if we accept the current proposal, what kind of message am I delivering to the public? 633, in reality, what citizens get is that this is a means to raise the toll. Well, it is unfair. The CHT actually has toll reduction of $15, but then this is the perception of the general public. You didn't deliver a message to the general public to encourage them to take public transportation, and others are actually remaining unchanged. So what is the purpose of the whole adjustments? There is only one conclusion, that is to say toll increases. Thank you, Chair. Secretary, any response?
Thank you, Chair. In the past few months, we have been consulting the public. Many people were of the view that when there is a two-step approach, we still have to be very prudent in the first step, and we mustn't take too big a step. Therefore, we believe that the 633 approach is a way to balance the different requests. Now, in terms of the traffic volume, under the 633 approach, it won't change much. Also, as I have said, for the 633 approach, instead of having a price differential of 55, it will be $30 only. Some private cars will be encouraged to go to the WHC. And for taxis, the toll will be unified. And we believe that in terms of diverting the taxis to the WHC, it will have a positive effect. So for the first step in the two-step approach, that's our objective. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Well, 20 members have spoken on this topic. There are different views, and I hope that the Bureau will consider our views seriously and try to see if you have anything new for us. Now we are on the third item, AOB. We haven't got anything under AOB. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance today.